Bhakkhavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhakkhavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ Dhammaṃ Saṅghaṃ Namasami. The Dhamma of the Lord Buddha is Sawakata Dhamma. It's the well-taught Dhamma. It's clear, it's precise, it's complete. Before the Buddha entered Parinibbana, before he left the world, he made it clear that as long as there were any missing pieces, as long as there were any blank spots, any areas of the teaching which were not fully explained, he would not enter Parinibbana. That he did leave the world at the time that he did was because he was confident that he had imparted all of the information needed for unenlightened human beings to become noble human beings. He said he gave the teachings freely, without the so-called closed fist of some teachers. He didn't divide the teachings into exoteric and esoteric teachings, reserving the esoteric teachings for special people or initiates, or they're not even teachings or Dhamma teachings which are only imparted to bhikkhus. The only restriction comes from the student himself or herself. Their ability to absorb and understand the teachings is what creates the levels of teaching that appear, rather than the Buddha's intention to create a system in which only the profound teachings were reserved for an elite group. So the teachings are complete, not in the sense that they give us all of the information about the nature of the world and the universe. It's not that they have ready answers for all the metaphysical questions that human beings have devised over the centuries. But this is a practical teaching, a teaching that leads onwards to a goal. It is a path-directed teaching. This is in Pali called Opanayiko. Sometimes we say leading onwards or leading inwards or whatever. But however we want to translate that, the underlying meaning of it is it's a teaching that leads somewhere. It's a teaching which has a goal. And it's a focused teaching, we could say. So the Buddha chose only those teachings, those aspects of the truth, of the way things are, or the way things have become, which would be of use. It's a pragmatic teaching, one which is focused on a goal, the goal of liberation. And it's not a time-bound teaching. The struggles, the difficulties that bhikkhus and bhikkhunis and laymen and laywomen went through 2,500 years ago in India, and the struggles that all of us are enduring through 2,500 years later in Thailand, are no different. The human mind hasn't changed, and the human mind isn't time-bound in that way. And so the Dhamma, which is the medicine for the sick human mind, is also unchanging. Dhamma teachings, wherever they are applied, whenever they are applied, are effective. This is a timeless teaching. It's not a time-bound teaching. And it's one which encourages us to verify the truth of the teachings. This is not a system, a philosophy, a metaphysic that requires us to believe blindly or to completely put away or suspend our critical faculties. It's a teaching which encourages us to come and look, because it is a teaching which is experientially based. It's a teaching which encourages us to come forward, go towards the teaching, test it out, try it out. Let's say it's ehipassiko Dhamma. And it can be verified because it is a teaching relating to the truth of our existence. It is a teaching based on experience, which is to say it is sanditiko. So the Buddha is offering us an analysis of the human condition. And because we are human beings and we have a human condition, then this is not of merely intellectual interest. It is of absolutely fundamental existential interest. It's talking about who we are. It's talking about how we're living this life. It's talking about making some meaning out of our human life. It's talking about understanding. And this is a really fundamental characteristic of the Dhamma, isn't it? This equation of understanding and freedom and happiness. These things are treated as synonyms. There's no freedom without true understanding. There's no true happiness without freedom. And when we clearly see that true peace, true happiness, true understanding, true freedom can only be experienced and realized through the abandonment and renunciation of defilements, then our commitment to the path becomes firm and strong and consistent. As long as we cherish some fantasies of a happiness somewhere in some realm, in some place with somebody, in some situation, then we're still in the realm of samsara. These are what we call bhava, or realms of existence. And we, most of us, have at one time or another, or still perhaps are prone to creating some kind of imaginative realm, and thinking if we could just set things up in that way, then we'd be happy. It is these days it's usually conceived of in terms of the ideal relationship, living in the ideal place, in the ideal climate, no money worries, no worries from this, no pressures from that, and everything set up perfectly. Then everything would be fine. This is taking delight in a realm of existence, and one which is not realizable. So the Buddha said, why do we need a Buddhist? Why do we need a sasana? Why does there need to be a Dhamma teaching? Do human beings need Dhamma teachings? Because, he said, we're subject to old age, birth, old age, sickness and death. Because we're subject to rebirth. If there was no rebirth, there was no old age, sickness and death, we could perhaps live without sasana. But because we are subject to these things, and because there is an escape from these things, then we have the Dhamma teachings as the complete, the clear, graduated path to that freedom, which we must go towards and verify for ourselves. Now, in the practice of Dhamma, quality of mind we need is an attentiveness, a fundamental interest in our experience, an inquiring mind. Seeking to penetrate the nature of things that we take for granted, not allowing the mind to become used to things, awakening the mind moment by moment. This is the essence of Dhamma practice, the awakening mind, awakening the mind to the most mundane activities, whether it's walking along a forest path, sweeping one's kuti, going to the toilet, brushing one's teeth, sitting down, getting up, putting on your robes, turning to the left, turning to the right, looking around. Bring this quality of awakening to one's every activity. And when we start looking at our experience, what we notice, I think, is that our mind is generally rather like that of one of the birds you see on the branches of trees. If you look at a bird, you see that it's in constant movement. Its head is in constant movement. It's looking to the left, it's looking to the right. It's in a constant state of unease, fear. It's grasping onto a branch, but it's ready to swoop off somewhere else as soon as the danger it expects materializes. And seeing how uneasy our existence is, how much discontent there is in the mind, and how we're searching for, grasping at anything which will carry us on to where we don't know, grasping at straws. Part of this is perhaps because at any one moment we're choosing one particular activity or one particular thing to do or one particular thing to attend to, and we are not doing a huge number of things. This is probably quite an obvious fact that at any moment the things that you're not doing outweigh the single thing you're doing by a huge number. And because of that, there is that always in the back of your mind, that there's a huge number of things you could possibly be doing that you're not doing at the present moment. And if you were to pick any one of this vast number of possibilities or potentialities, maybe you wouldn't be that interested in exchanging it for what you're doing right at the moment. It's not that you have necessarily a particular desire, but there's this kind of amorphous sense of things that you could be doing, things that could be giving you more happiness than what you're doing right now. So there's this sense of unrealized potential or possibility, which is hovering away in the back of your mind, which undermines your contentment with the present moment. And so there are ways, strategies the mind comes up to deal with this, and one is the search for intensity. It's like when you turn up a radio or you turn up the music, so you drown out everything else. And one way of sort of drowning out of dealing with discontent is to drown it out. And the search for intensity is what we call kama tanha, sensual desire. The sensual desire is not always so much desire for pleasure as desire for intensity. You can see many things that people get obsessed with in the world are not, even at the most superficial analysis, particularly pleasurable, but they have the quality of intensity. And so there is a craving for intensity as a way of kind of blasting discontent and uneasiness out of the mind. So this is something that we can start looking at, how we deal with our basic experience of being alive. and the kind of the craving to grasp onto something, to identify with something, and to attain some sense of solidity by grasping onto material things, or grasping onto ideas, views, philosophies, feelings. This craving to make ourselves solid, this fear that we're not solid, that we aren't anything, and dealing with that with finding something which seems solid and holding on to it tightly, or else trying to blast all the fears and anxieties and discontent out of the mind with some kind of very intense experience, or just wanting to shut down and turn off the switch, go to sleep, go into a dull state of mind so you don't have to be alive and awake anymore. Notice, observe, not to take a stand on it and say it's bad or it's evil. But noticing is, can you see that kind of activity in your mind? Because the path to peace and the path to liberation, to say, can only build up a momentum. You're only willing to endure through the difficulties and the pain when you see the situation clearly. You have to really see the prison. You have to see the bars. You have to clearly recognize how dire your situation is before you're willing to, go to all the the difficulties of burrowing your way out, or digging a tunnel, or sawing away at the bars. So the way-finding mind, the wayfaring mind, the mind that loves the Dhamma and inclines towards the Dhamma and is willing to give up everything for the Dhamma, is not a mind which will appear spontaneously for most people. There may be, for all of us, moments of inspiration, but inspiration is not a real refuge. Inspiration is a condition, and you can't put your faith in conditions in that way. But through this wise consideration of experience, of your own experience in the present, reviewing your experiences in the past, really bring up this sense of sober sadness, and how sad it is, what a sad way of living this is, what a waste of a human life just to be going around in the same old circles of experience, more intense experience, new, interesting experience. And you're still in the prison, you're still in the maze of experience. And the path of Dhamma is not to grasp onto and gain some particular kind of experience and make that your home, make a nest in that kind of experience. But it's to understand the nature of all experience, to be the one who awakens to experience. So looking very closely and seeing how sensual craving or the craving for intensity works in your mind, how bhavatanha, desire for a particular state of mind, a particular state of being, a particular realm, how that manifests, desire to get rid of, to shut off, to shut down, to be somewhere else, anywhere else, but here and now. How those things manifest in your mind, and how they drag you down, and how they sully and defile the mind. There's no way that you can have any real feeling for what that word defilement means unless you're willing to look very closely at your experience in this way. So many of the words the Buddha himself used, or the Kruba Ajahn used to a cursory investigation or a merely intellectual appreciation, these words seem unusually or overly intense, too much. It's not really as bad as all that. Come on. This sense of lack of connection with some of the technical vocabulary that the Buddha used or the teachers use. Why is that? Are they really so inept in their use of language? Or is it rather that we're still looking through a glass darkly, we haven't seen clearly what they're talking about, haven't really looked at our experience, haven't really started to bring up this sense of sober sadness, is willing to withdraw and to put down. Now when that starts to become a more easy, more fluent for us, then attitudes change, and things that we'd formerly seen as giving us security, as reassurances, now we see as burdens. And so renunciation becomes joyful, because if renunciation is a matter of giving up something that you really love and cherish because someone tells you it's good for you, then it's not a real renunciation. But renunciation is, in the traditional similes, like the snake sloughing off its old skin. It's not something that it needs anymore. It's not something that it wants anymore. Because it's seen with wisdom that the path to liberation is not one of grasping onto anything at all. So the moment you identify with anything, and then you give that thing value. And this is one aspect of upadana, or attachment. It means the giving of value to things, the giving of undue, unmerited, unearned value to things. It's a wrong, a misvaluation of conditions. And the unexamining mind is one which fools itself that it becomes more secure through doing that. But the mind which sees clearly, the inquiring mind, sees that every time we identify with something, we attach to something, we give value to something, we limit ourselves, we constrict ourselves. This is not the path to freedom. So in the initial stages of practice, we need to give time to this kind of reflection. But at the same time, we also need to give a lot of time, or the majority of our time, to the training in mindfulness and samadhi, because things which seem kind of rather difficult to grasp and rather profound, or even alien ideas to the thinking mind can seem absolutely obvious and clear-cut to the non-thinking mind. There's been a tendency, I don't know for how long and how widespread this is, but to equate thinking with intelligence. In fact, yesterday somebody came to the monastery and said that before she came, somebody had said to her, don't go to the monastery too much and get too much into that meditation thing, because if you do, you might end up with Alzheimer's. If you sit around not thinking about anything for very long, then your brain will atrophy. Thinking, actually, if it's unwholesome thoughts full of anger and hatred or greed and jealousy and so on, those are the things that burn up and destroy the brain cells, I would say. Rather, the thing that illumines the mind and preserves the brain is mindfulness, isn't it? Clarity. And it's not thinking about things. And the kind of liberation that we're talking about here is not to be sitting around without any thoughts in the mind for hours on end and days on end, but it means a liberation from the compulsivity of the thought process. Thinking is like the servant in the house that's become the master. It's taken over, and you have to put it back in its place. Know when's a good time, and when's not a good time to be thinking about things. Being able to, the ideal is that you can apply the power of directed thought on the subject that you choose for the length of time that you choose. And when there's no need, no necessity to think, then you can stop thinking. This is what meditation practice is seeking to help us achieve. So a rounded, a balanced mental, spiritual life is one in which there are periods of thought and periods of no thought. And it is the experience of the mind itself, not bound up with with forms and sounds and odors and so on. The mind which is not remembering and dwelling on the past, not anticipating the future. The mind which is present, firm, grounded, bright, sharp, clear, peaceful in the present moment, which changes your way of thinking, perhaps more than anything else. So this is not like an intellectual insight, but it's a new perspective on life. When you experience the purity of the mind very clearly, then the word defilement just becomes quite obvious, the most clear and accurate description of what happens when you lose mindfulness. There is this sense of sullying, of dirtiness, of defilement, of something beautiful and pure and valuable being dirtied and being enveloped in mist and smoke and smog. And when you incline the mind towards peace, then you find, without any shadow of a doubt, the simple truth that it's pleasant. It's extremely pleasant, and it's a pleasantness and a happiness and a rapture which feels, I think the only word I can use is natural or organic. These are like cliche kinds of words these days, aren't they? But compared with the happiness from seeing beautiful sounds and seeing beautiful forms and hearing beautiful sounds and so on, there's a happiness of excitement, isn't it? The essence of that happiness is excitement and stimulation. So perhaps it would even be inaccurate to call it happiness. It's a pleasure of stimulation. But the happiness of peace in the mind is not a happiness of stimulation. It's not something that has to be sustained in that way. And there's a sense of rightness about it. There's a sense of authenticity, of coming home. And through constant effort to stabilize and to develop that peace further, then desires, attachments, interest in all those activities of body, speech and mind which hinder the realization of that peace become much less, where our inclination has changed. And we have that confidence to give up things that we formerly cherish deeply. And we're brave enough to do that, we're courageous enough to do that, because we know that there is something superior. So this is not just groping in the dark now. We have some experience. We're verifying the teaching. And we're seeing very clearly the relationship between defilements and suffering. We're seeing the relationship between the cessation of defilements and peace and happiness. We're verifying Four Noble Truths. And if this is not enlightenment yet, perhaps, but we can extrapolate from our experience so far. You know, we have we've abandoned, we've let go of this amount of defilement, and we've experienced this amount of peace. And so our logic tells us that if we carry on this same path, we let go of more defilements, we'll experience more peace. The more that we follow defilements, the further away from our goal that we will stray. So we have a path, we have a focus. This is the Opanayiko Dhamma. It leads us onwards if we follow it. It leads us inwards, it leads us onwards, it leads us to the goal. But we need constant vigilance. There's alertness of mind, sharpness of mind, because the old habits are very deep and the defilements are very tricky. And but having said that, there are certain ways of setting our mind up which seem quite basic, but are surprisingly effective. And the Buddha spoke about this on a number of occasions. He said, abandon cravings by looking on them as being something coarse or base, or as enemies to your spiritual progress. It's developing this clear attitude of no, this is incompatible with the goal of my life, the goal of the holy life, and can be reaffirming that commitment to the ideal of relinquishment and the ideal of peace, and it becomes an object of mindfulness, so that when there is something which is trying to pull us away, we remember that, and the letting go can occur quite naturally. But once the defilements get their foot in the door, it's very difficult to get them out again, isn't it? And remember, in my hometown in England, a lot of places they have these Jehovah Witnesses who go around the doors with Bibles and biblical tracts, and they have all these techniques, and they do this actually. The moment the door opens, they put their foot in the door to stop you closing it when you realise who it is. And the other method they do is they get women with young children so that people won't sort of be rude to them, because my mother's technique now is she doesn't open the door. She goes to an upstairs window and opens the windows and says, "My son is a Buddhist monk." And I'm sorry. So they leave. And so don't open the door to the defilements. And just look at them from an upstairs window and say, "I am a Buddhist monk. I'm not interested." Of course, I'm not intending to compare Christian teachings with defilements here, other than in the most loose way, of course. Just to give you a kind of an idea of the attitude which I'm suggesting. We talk about samana sanya a lot. This is using conventions. We're not conventionally speaking, we're Buddhist monks, and we're using the convention of being a samana and remembering the qualities of a samana and developing them as objects of mindfulness. Mindfulness always needs a peg. We can talk about mindfulness as being awareness, but actually you always have to be mindful of something. You can't just be mindful. And so the skillful meditator is someone who creates clearly defined pegs for his mindfulness. And the Buddha said, what are the supporting conditions for development of satipatthana? And he said sanya, clear-cut sanya. It's like clear defining what is body, what is feelings, what is citta, what is Dhamma. What are the things that you want to remember? Similarly with our precepts, you have to learn the precepts and go into them and be very clear about what the precepts are and what is an offence and what isn't an offence, and so on. And then when you've really grounded yourself in that, and it's right there, like almost to say, like in the front, the top drawer of your mind, as it were. Then when a particular situation comes up, then it pops into your mind, doesn't it? Oh, that's an offence. I can't do that. Where does that come from? How is it that pops up into your mind? This is a mindfulness of a precept, which comes because you have created a clear perception, memory of the precept, and so your mindfulness has a peg. And so consciously creating pegs for your mindfulness, and samana sanya is one really important one. We're a Buddhist monk now. Buddha says we're not lay people anymore. We don't act like lay people. We don't speak like lay people. we have a higher standard, and that's why we're respected and we're supported by the society, because we are perceived to adhere to higher standards of morality and general conduct, to be beings who are devoting their life to moral and spiritual principles and to the transmission of the teachings. So we remind ourselves of, conventionally speaking, who we are, what we're doing. And so when we have a certain desire arises in the mind, then we remember that, just as we remember a precept. Is that compatible or incompatible with my ideals as a samana, as one who's gone forth from the lay life to lead the holy life? And this is, it's not a very technical or a very subtle or abstruse kind of meditation technique, but it is something which is very effective if you apply yourself to it. So many, we hear so many teachings and so many techniques, and sometimes we could become a jack of all trades and a master of none, as we say. We know metta practice and asubha practice and reflection on the elements and all these things, but we very rarely perhaps take any of them really as far as they to the level of being a vehicle or a refuge for us in our practice. And so we need to take these teachings up and really apply ourselves to them to the extent that they become vehicles, things which will lead us onwards, lead us to the goal. So keep coming back to this Dhamma, the well taught Dhamma. Reflect on just how well taught it is. These groups of Dhammas, the suttas. Read the suttas and just bring that up. Just how well taught this is. This brings up real joy and rapture in a holy life. And remember, the teaching is something to be verified. It's inviting us to verify, not inviting us to believe in it. It's inviting us to check it out. Compare it with your own experience. Is it true? Does it ring true for you? And with all the teachings, always have this general kind of organizing principle, leading onwards to the goal of relinquishment and the ending of defilement, not the path of accumulation, the path of clarity and peace, not the path of confusion. So studying the teachings, memorizing the teachings, becoming fluent with them, fluent with the concepts, fluent with the ideas, but more than anything else, letting go of all the obstructive mental states, desires, thoughts, anxieties. Keep putting them down, putting down the burden of proliferation, and allowing the mind to shine, allowing the light of the mind to shine forth, and to realize the beauty and the nobility of the peaceful mind. So I'd like to offer these thoughts to you this evening.